Hey everybody, it's Chef Nicole and Eric coming to you again virtually from the Kitchener Market. Today we will be making shepherd's pie, or rather it's cottage pie, because traditionally cottage pie is used with ground beef, and traditionally shepherd's pie is used with ground lamb. So we're cooking it with beef, so therefore it's going to be a cottage pie. And the first thing we're going to want to do to get this dish started off is deal with our mashed potatoes. Chef Nicole, how are we going to start off that process?
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is peel and dice our potatoes. Just for sake of time with this video, we did go ahead and do them ahead of time. You're going to do them into about 1-inch cubes. There should be a video that you guys can look at to see how to dice up your vegetables. If you see the carrot one, it's very similar to the potato, so you can go ahead and reference that. You're going to want to cut them into 1-inch cubes, put them into cold water. You definitely always want to start your potatoes in cold water. The reason is because otherwise the heat of the water outside the potato is going to make it cook faster, and you're going to end up with like mushy potatoes and still raw in the middle.
And also by submerging it in water at the beginning, it kind of removes the excess starch as well, right?
True, yeah, you're going to pull out some of that starch. It's also going to keep them from turning brown. So you guys could prep these ahead of time, and as long as you keep them covered in water, they're going to be just fine. So we're going to salt our water, get it on the stove, and we're going to let them cook until fork tender, about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how large you cut them, as well as how many you're cooking at the same time. For what we made, was probably about 12 to 15 minutes. Drain them, and then we're going to be ready to do the other components. But while your potatoes are cooking, you're going to make the meat mixture. I think Eric is going to show us how to do that.
Absolutely. So we have our pot preheated, and basically we're going to add about 3 tablespoons of olive oil to the pot or pan. And we're going to start off by adding our 1 onion that is diced up. Let that cook for a minute, and then we'll add our garlic. So to start off, I will add the onion to our preheated pan.
Excellent. And again, just to remind everybody, if you've been following along this series with us, you'll know that the reason that we are adding our garlic a little bit later in the cooking process is that garlic does tend to burn very quickly. It's very small, and if it gets too hot, it's going to get really hard, it's going to turn brown, it's going to be very, very bitter. So that's why we're going to start our onions off first and then add our garlic in a couple minutes later so that doesn't happen.
All right, so our onion's been sweating for about a minute, so now it's time to add our garlic. So I'm going to do that now, and then following the garlic, what we're going to do is add our herbs, followed by the ground beef and our tomato paste. As well as the salt and pepper. And this recipe only calls for a teaspoon of each. Especially with salt, we don't want that much because we're using beef stock and that has a lot of sodium in it. But people can season to taste, right, Chef Nicole?
Absolutely. So what we always recommend is anytime that you're using like a stock or anything like that, it does have, and even some salty cheeses or things like that, if it already has a salt content in it, you definitely want to reduce the amount of salt that you're using at the beginning of the recipe. And then as you cook, as chefs, we're tasting as we cook. We don't wait till we get to the end of a recipe before we try it. I'm sure, do you do that in your kitchen as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Tasting is always important. That's how you know it's good. You never want to send anything out to whether it be friends, family, customers without tasting it first.
Right, and it's a lot easier to fix as you go than when you get to the end and then you realize that you missed something. So definitely taste as you go, then you can season as you go as well, and then that's going to make sure that you have a really great recipe at the end.
100%.
So Eric, I noticed that you were squeezing tomato paste out of a tube. I know we covered this in another video, but if people are just joining us for the first time, can you just let them know why we prefer to use it out of a tube?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it was the spaghetti bolognese video or if it was the tomato sauce video, but I explained previously that if you buy your tomato paste in a tube, it stores for longer, or rather it's easier to store. Like you explained earlier, if you buy it in a metal can, you need to transfer it to either a plastic bag or a plastic container, because basically the acidity from the tomato eats at the metal.
Yeah, for sure.
And in turn makes it go bad much faster. So that can store up in your fridge for months in the tube. So it's just a lot more convenient. All right, so our beef has been cooking for about 6 to 7 minutes. One of the easiest ways to gauge if your beef is fully cooked is just to see if all the pink from the beef is gone. So when the beef turns brown, that's a universal sign that it's cooked. So after we've been cooking it, like I said, for about 6 to 7 minutes, we're going to add our stock along with our very hard to pronounce ingredients, Worcestershire sauce. I just call it W sauce.
W sauce, I like that.
W sauce, right? Easy,
yeah,
easy.
For sure.
So we'll add our W sauce and our stock, and then we're going to let it simmer for 10 to 12 minutes. And right before we add our beef mixture into our baking dish, we will add our vegetables into the pot, give it a quick mix. We're doing this at the end only because our vegetables are already cooked, right? These are canned vegetables, and they will reheat when we bake the dish in the oven. All right, so our beef has been simmering in the stock for about 10 minutes now. And now we're going to go ahead and add our vegetables. So they consist of carrots, peas, and corn. And Chef Nicole and I were discussing this earlier. You can buy these in cans, but also at the grocery store they usually have frozen bag mix of all three of the ingredients, which is corn, peas, and carrots. So whatever way is more economical for you, or maybe whether it be convenient, economical, whatever works for you, do it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and add our vegetables. So we have our corn here, 1 can of it. And then we have our carrot and pea mix. And literally, I'm going to give it a stir and turn the heat off. And then we're going to put it into our baking tray and layer the mashed potatoes on top.
Perfect. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. We're going to do a quick mash on our potatoes. I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of cream, just a little bit. I like to add about a tablespoon or so at a time. You guys can see I'm eyeballing it a little bit, just because depending on how much moisture you've left in your potatoes, they might not need as much cream. I have 2 tablespoons of butter that I'm putting in there. Potatoes don't have a lot of flavor on their own, guys, so the 2 things that they love are salt and fat. So don't be afraid to salt your potatoes while they're being cooked, and then get that butter in there. It's going to be just delicious. So
I was telling Chef Nicole earlier about the first time I made this dish at home, and I was using glass Pyrex. And I kind of found this out the hard way, that you need to let your beef mixture cool down if you are going to use a glass tray. The reason is because the temperature shock can actually break the glass. So if you are going to use a Pyrex, make sure to let your beef mix cool down before putting it into the tray.
Absolutely, that's a great tip. And I think that's just really important. And same if you're using Pyrex and you're taking it out of the fridge. So when I think, say you were doing this as a make-ahead,
right.
If you were taking it out of the fridge and going into the oven, you don't want to go straight from the fridge to the oven. You're gonna want to bring it out, put it on the counter while your oven preheats, let the chill come off a bit, and then put it in the oven. It's just the safest way to do it. So that looks so good, Eric. I can't wait to try it when it comes out of the oven. I'm going to show you guys how to make the potatoes that are going to go on top, and then we're going to bake in the oven for about 15 minutes or so just to kind of let everything combine, and then we're going to show you what it looks like when it comes out. So I'm just going to kind of add a few spoonfuls kind of to each part of that. We don't want to end up with any of the meat mixture coming through our potatoes. That's why I'm kind of spreading it out, and then I'm just going to spread it out on top. And then Eric is going to show you how to kind of get a nice texture on top before it gets popped in the oven. So I'm just going to kind of add a few spoonfuls, kind of like each part of that. We don't want to end up with any of the meat mixture coming through our potatoes. That's why I'm kind of spreading it out, and then I'm just going to spread it out on top. And then Eric is going to show you how to kind of get a nice texture on top before it gets popped in the oven.
All right, guys, so we're almost ready to put our shepherd's pie in our preheated oven for 15 minutes. But as you can see, one thing I always like to do before I bake it is kind of run my fork through the top layer of the mashed potato. And this is for the textural aspect of it. What we're doing here is kind of opening up more space for the potato to become nice and browned. So this will definitely help with the texture of the shepherd's pie.